Welcome back to another edition of Rational Wrestling Talk. This is the Rational Wrestling Mark, and I'm going to be talking about the NXT Women's Division. Now, in my opinion, and this is only just my opinion, this is not factual, this is pure subjection, right? Only subjective. In my opinion, the NXT Women's Division is the best women's division in wrestling today. Now, a lot of people would argue and say that the AEW Women's Division is top-notch, is the best women's division. Now, a lot of you are going to agree when I say that the main roster women's division is underwhelming. It's not cutting it. It's lacking a whole lot of excitement, right? The main roster women's division has been boring for a very long time. It hasn't been consistent. You may have a couple women that are entertaining, that catch your attention, but overall, there's no momentum when it comes to the women's division on Raw and SmackDown. Right? There's nothing interesting going on there. Cool. Okay, it's cool that Io Sky is the women's champion, right? They've given Asuka a gazillion repackages. Charlotte Flair is still the same old, right? Damage Control is overstayed its welcome, right? The tag team division with the women is non-existent, and those belts absolutely mean nothing. The women tag team belts mean nothing. Rhea Ripley doesn't have much challengers except for Raquel Rodriguez and Nia Jax. The returning Nia Jax. But the rest of the division on Raw, it's completely non-existent. And those women have no momentum at all. Nothing's going on with the rest of the women. But the reason why I say the NXT Women's Division is the best women's division of all time, right, currently. Yes, even better than the Impact Knockouts division. I will admit, for a long time, and a lot of people may not admit this, but the Impact TNA Knockouts division had the best women's division for a long time. They are the ones that really kick-started the women's revolution back in 2007. I mean, how can you forget about the Knockouts? They're the ones that really but they kick-started the revolution. They're the reason why a lot of wrestling fans take women's wrestling seriously as of today. When back then the WWE didn't care for women's wrestling. The WWE never had a place, or they never thought that women's wrestling would ever be a draw. And a part of me still believes that they feel that way. But when it comes to NXT, right? NXT was the brand that gave a lot of people hope for women's wrestling, right? If you didn't see Impact, right? If you didn't watch TNA, which a lot of people didn't really watch TNA from, certain eras. Now, obviously, 2007 to 2010, maybe 2011, a lot of people are watching TNA, but their ratings, as you know, have declined in the past decade, right? But that's neither here or there. But the women's division in NXT, it gave you hope that the women will be taken more serious, that they would not just be viewed as eye candy. Not that there's anything wrong with a woman on a wrestling show being viewed as eye candy, because having sex appeal, that's going to reel fans in, right? A women's wrestler can still wrestle but have sex appeal, right? And they need to have sex appeal in order for your male audience to keep watching. Like, these women can look good, they can dress a little bit provocative and still go out there and put on a quality match and still make the fans care about their matches. You know, you saw that with Paige, Emma from the very beginning of NXT. Their match they had back at NXT TakeOver, the first TakeOver, you know, that's what really started the momentum for women's wrestling in WWE specifically to be, you know, put on a higher pedestal. And then that trend continued with Charlotte, Sasha, Becky, Bayley, right? Then Asuka came along. Then Ember Moon came along. You know, then you had Shayna Baszler, Rhea Ripley, a lot of quality names in NXT, right? And I would say that no matter what era of NXT, including the current one that we're in right now, right? This rebranded NXT that we're seeing, right? Obviously, Triple H's NXT was better, and a lot of people will prefer Triple H's NXT over Shawn Michaels' NXT, right? But I do believe when it comes to both of NXT, both Triple H and, you know, Shawn Michaels' NXT, you know, specifically the women's division, they have been consistently good, right? I can't really remember a time where the NXT women's division was losing any momentum, right? I think a lot of people will say that it has lost momentum because of the rebrand of NXT. The only thing that has changed is that Shawn Michaels took over, and you're introducing a new generation of women, right? But a lot of these women were not an Asuka, were not a Rhea Ripley or Shayna Baszler or a Sasha or a Charlotte or an Ember or a Bayley or Becky Lynch or Paige or Emma, who had indie wrestling experience, right? They didn't have a name. Those girls had a name outside NXT. When it comes to these, this new crop of women, they're just starting off fresh. They have a strong foundation, right? They're homegrown talent. You talk about Cora Jade, Tiffany Stratton, Nikita Lyons, Roxanne Perez, Thea Hale. I got to see a little bit of her. And when it comes to her, man, she's all character, and that's the most important thing, is developing a character. And that's what I've noticed when it comes to the NXT women's division. And the reason why I say it hasn't lost momentum, it's because these women, whether you want to admit it or not, can actually go. That's just my opinion, right? But I can't really think of a time where the NXT women's division was ever dull. Right? Because you look at Shawn Michaels' NXT or Triple H's NXT, right? Two different products, two different minds, right? Triple H and Shawn Michaels, they have a different mindset toward NXT. Shawn Michaels, you can see his vision. You can, if you watch NXT closely, you pay attention to the women's division, right? Specifically the women on the show. You can see firsthand of Shawn Michaels, HBK's clear vision. It's really about developing the future for wrestling, for the WWE, right? A lot of those women did not have the luxury of being from the indie scene. Look how fast Tiffany Stratton has been picking up this wrestling stuff. Look how fast she has developed and gotten better. Look, Tiffany Stratton has only been wrestling for about, a year or two? And in my opinion, she's thrown way better moonsaults than Charlotte has ever did. Charlotte has been doing moonsaults for about a decade now. And they still don't look as good as it should be. Tiffany Stratton has only been wrestling for about 2 years. Her moonsault blows Charlotte's moonsault out the freaking water. And when it comes to character development, that's the biggest thing right there, is character development. You will notice that almost every woman on the show in NXT has a character. They have a storyline. Every woman on that show is different. They're unique. They have their own persona. You can't say the same thing. You can't say the same for the main roster's women's division. Probably even AEW women's division. And when it comes to AEW's women's division, I'm not really impressed. I'm not. I'm just not impressed by their division. I feel like it's kind of inconsistent, right? It's a little bit inconsistent. I look at their division, and first of all, Britt Baker saying that that there's no need for like a performance center, or I think she said something that of the effect that AEW doesn't need a performance center. I don't know if maybe y'all can correct me in the comment section, but those were her words, right? Didn't she say that AEW does not need a performance center? Well, if she did happen to say that, I disagree. Because you got women that are probably starting out brand new, and they know nothing about wrestling. They don't know how to take a bump correctly. They can't cut a promo. They can't tell a story. They can't sell correctly. They don't know how to work. And you need a developmental system put in place to give those women that are beginners the proper training, right? The proper tune-up to develop their skills. You see, NXT right now, this version of NXT I like because it's the perfect training ground for not just the women, but for, the men, right? This is where homegrown talent can, develop and fine-tune their skills, their craft. This is a perfect training ground. They're not exposed to a bigger, wider audience, right? they're constantly in small arenas, in the same arena, right? About a couple hundred people. So there's not a lot of pressure on them to be out there competing every week in front of hundreds of thousands of people, only on their, only on the takeovers or the premium live events that they perform in a bigger stage, right? But the main reason why I'm a fan of the NXT women's division, it's the wide variety of characters that are being presented on the show. And like I said, they all are different. If you don't believe me, watch a couple of episodes of NXT or watch a couple of segments, you'll know what I'm talking about. Hands down, leaps and bounds from what you see on the main roster's women's division. Everybody gets, some TV time. Everybody has a chance to develop their character, right? It's not just focused on one woman. It's focused on a variety of women. Dana Brooke went back to NXT, and that was probably the best move for her because now she has an opportunity to repackage herself. You see a lot of, underutilized talent that go back to NXT, they wind up doing their best work in NXT compared to the main roster. I had a chance to look at Dana Brooke's, matches in NXT, and I gotta say, man, she has definitely improved. She's definitely presented a whole lot better down there than she is on Raw and SmackDown. And it goes to show you that they weren't really giving her much of a chance to show that she has improved, right? She has more of a character in NXT. It's the key is character development. And I see that these women are good. They're decent wrestlers. Personally, one of my favorites right now when it comes to the women's division is I believe her name is Lara Valkyrie. I think Lara Valkyrie. Yeah, Lara Valkyrie. Yeah, I like her. She's really good. And then there's another one, Blair Davenport. She's pretty good. I like Roxanne Perez. She's like the Rey Mysterio of the women's division. She's the underdog. And Tiffany Stratton is a very good athlete. But she's an example of picking up the business very quickly, the way Kurt Angle picked it up quickly in his first year, right? Now, when I say Tiffany Stratton throws a better moonsault than Charlotte, I'm not saying that she's better than Charlotte. Obviously, she has some years to go. I feel like at some point she could be better than Charlotte, given enough more time, more experience. I think in due time she will bypass Charlotte, and that's just my opinion, right? Because before a lot of people start becoming fans of Charlotte, a lot of people were calling her boring, a ripoff of her father, boring in the ring, a lot of Charlotte haters. I think Charlotte is one of the best, and she puts on consistently good matches. But what I'm saying is, in a couple years or so, Tiffany Stratton, I feel like, will surpass Charlotte in terms of in-ring work, character work, and just a better athlete. But that's just my opinion, right? But the women's division in NXT, it gives you a clear indication that this is the future. Like, this is the definitive future for women's wrestling. not just for women's wrestling, but when it comes to the men in NXT, that's the real future. You think about Carmella Hayes, Braun Breaker, Grayson Waller, other talent like the Creed brothers, and who else? Tony D'Angelo, Wes Lee. Wes Lee right now is killing it. He's one of my favorites. Nathan Fraser. Just so much like quality talent in NXT, right? But that's the future right there. And I like that Shawn Michaels is focusing on building up the talent, right? Building up their characters, building up, just building up their characters, because that's the most important thing, And I think a lot of these women, not all of them, but I think a good majority of them are decent talkers, are able to cut a competent promo, are able to talk, right? Compared to what we see on the main roster, it's not really impressive, But hands down, NXT just has the better women's division. The matches are decent. The character development is there. The storytelling is there. If you don't believe me, just watch it for yourself. You got some potential in Gigi Dolan and JC Jane. Kiana James too. But all those are unique characters, right? They have their own story. They have their own agenda, Nobody feels like the same. And that's the problem when it comes to a women's division. Sometimes the women feel like the same, cookie cutter. And when I look at the NXT women's division, I don't see cookie cutter. I don't see that at all. I mean, I feel the same way about the Knockouts division, right? When you look at the Knockouts division, you don't see cookie cutter. A lot of the women were not the same. They were different in their own way. They have their own unique personality. And that's the same vibe that I'm getting with the NXT women's division. And I talked about in my past video, months ago, that Shawn Michaels knows how to book a better women's division than Triple H and Vince McMahon. And I'll go as far to say better than Tony Khan. That's right. I said it. Better than Tony Khan. Now, Triple H knew what he was doing with the women in NXT of his own version of NXT, his NXT, right? But I think on the main roster, with him having a lot more on his plate creatively, it's doing some damage with the women's division on the main roster, right? And it's causing some inconsistencies, right? But Shawn Michaels, he knows how to book a women's division, which I never thought I would ever say, but that's, but you can see his vision for NXT. And I like his vision for NXT. I don't think a lot of people are giving Shawn Michaels enough credit. I'm going to give Shawn Michaels his credit. I think he's done a great job booking the women's division in NXT. Is it better than Triple H's women's division of his NXT? It's debatable. It's debatable. But with this division, it feels more like homegrown talent. It's It's paving a strong foundation, right? And it's the foundation that any era of women's wrestling definitely needed. And we're seeing that today when it comes to the women in NXT. They're being given that strong foundation, that proving ground, right? That a lot of the women, right? A lot of the women back in the day didn't really get a chance to have. Some say they had SCW, OVW, right? But they weren't on the same level as NXT, right? You got to remember, women's wrestling wasn't taken seriously back then. Even when you had OVW and FCW, the women were not treated like a bigger deal in the show, right? Like how they are right now. So, well, that's my thoughts and opinions on NXT's women's division. Let me know your comments, your opinions in the comments section. Do you think the women's division in NXT is overall the best women's division in wrestling? That's my opinion, right? I can't just say from a wrestling standpoint, but from a character standpoint, storytelling standpoint, just overall, right? So give me your thoughts down below. Thank you all for watching. Like the video. This is another edition of Rational Wrestling Talk, and I'm out. Peace.